So I look at the word as undiet as being really important in midlife because it's an unraveling. We
Mhm.
are unraveling all of the BS. Hopefully that's okay for me to say on your show,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we're unraveling all of the BS that a woman in midlife has learned about how she's supposed to eat to be healthy, the size of her body to be healthy, worthy, beautiful, all of the above. And when a woman in midlife can focus on the work to help herself do that unraveling, there's a trickle down effect. The younger women and girls that are around her, be that her own kids, nieces, if she's a teacher, the kids that she's influencing there, a coach, however woman in midlife might interact with the younger generations, when they see and or experience how she is learning to unravel and unlearn all of these toxic messages that she has learned about food in her body in a very proactive way, they start to notice like, oh, I can do that with my body too. I'm hearing in these teen magazines or on the social media or the TikTok, like I should be doing this and this and this for my beauty,
Mhm.
but that's not what's being modeled from me in front of me in my direct circles of live in-person mentors. And so that's how I see that cycle, because it is a generational cycle of
Mhm.
disordered eating. All of my clients, I'm going to say 98% of them, they have been on some form of diet, restrictive eating, or just extreme awareness of food in their body since puberty.
Welcome to your Yes Build Life. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle, educator, healer, speaker, guide, and fierce advocate for your yes. I help sensitive and successful men and women find, reclaim, and live from their full embodied yes. Through empowering you to understand your energetic hygiene, establish healthy boundaries, and heal your nervous system, you'll be able to create your yes-filled life and move through your days with more freedom, more ease, and more joy. You'll hear inspiring stories of people who found their full-bodied yes, thought leaders who pursued their own dreams and are living life on their terms, and learn new ways to find the courage, joy, ease, and freedom to more fully step into your yes-filled life. Say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. Join me on this journey to discover your yes-filled life. Whether you're looking to break free from the golden handcuffs, start a new business, find your dream job, or simply live with more intention and mindfulness, I've got you covered. Let's explore the possibilities together and make your dreams a reality. Ready? Let's do this. Let's get you to your yes-filled life. Hello, and welcome back to Your Yes-Filled Life. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle. Today on the podcast, we have Amanda Bullat. Over the past 2 decades, Amanda has navigated her own food and body liberation journey. She found diet rock bottom and a lifetime to recovery while traveling in Nepal. After a successful competitive running career, she went on to recover from a disordered relationship with food and exercise. Her recovery allowed her to earn a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics from Bastyr University. She's honored to serve as a guide and mentor to her clients, partnering with them to heal their relationship with food and their body through simple, specific strategies based on the principles of intuitive eating, health at every size, and her unique SAVOR Strategies of Healing. Amanda works in collaboration with her clients to create practical, actionable steps so they can stop feeling chaotic around food, find compassion for their ever changing bodies, and feel empowered to have a fulfilling life savoring food and body. Let's dive right into this conversation with Amanda Bullat. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Brenda. Thanks so much for chatting with me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. I am just so excited to meet you in Pitch to Press and have loved the conversations that we've had. about the work that you do and the offers that you share with your clients. And I wanted to bring you on the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's been an honor to meet all of our different colleagues in Pitch to Press. And, you and I, our work overlaps so much too, which I think we're going to get into today, which is really exciting to meet colleagues where you can kind of dovetail and support each other's work in that way. So yeah, I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and a certified intuitive eating counselor. And I refer to myself as the undiet dietitian, which we're going to get into today, because I help women in midlife. So we're talking, say, 35 to 60 are where most of my clients land. Help them break up with dieting, break up with diet culture, and reclaim their own definition of health and wellness from an undiet perspective. So most of the time, what I'm teaching my clients is how to reclaim their health through using the principles of intuitive eating. And I, of course, have my unique spin on the principles of intuitive eating. And then also helping them to enjoy movement more, take a look at their relationships. So, I'm a dietitian, I'm not a mental health counselor, but there's so much overlap between the mental health and when it comes to our relationship with food and our bodies. And so oftentimes I'm coordinating care with therapists for the mutual clients that we're supporting. So I really feel like women in this stage of life, it's been decades that they have been following food rules and should eats and shouldn't eat lists. And for many of the women that come into my practice, they generally are concerned about their health because they're in midlife. Maybe they're seeing some metabolic changes. They're just seeing some different side effects of perimenopause and menopause in their body. And so they kind of end up in this stuck place because they've always been told, well, health equates being smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But the tricks that they've used in the past, aka the diets they've used in the past, they don't work for a body in midlife.
Right.
They don't work for the body. They don't work for their time. They don't work for their stress response and their nervous system response. They just don't work. So my clients and other women that I talk to in this age group can feel like really stuck because they've only ever been told before to like lose weight and that will fix everything. And when they find like it's impossible to lose weight or they do it with limiting success, but then more weight comes back on, they're just really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my work with them helps, like I said, there is some structure around it as we kind of go through the principles of intuitive eating and my spin on them and help them to start nourishing themselves from a very basic fundamental perspective with food, which means feeding yourself regularly, feeding yourself consistently enough throughout the day, feeding yourself enough. The number of times that I talk to women and they're just plain old not eating enough, again, because they think they need to be smaller to be healthier,
Mm-hmm.
that is totally derailing their actual health goals. And so we work on creating this foundation around consistent nourishment with eating regularly, eating a variety of foods. So again, there we kind of fall into, if they've been following a list of eat this, don't eat this for decades, there's probably not a lot of variety going on with food.
Right.
And then that then is limiting their satisfaction with an eating experience too. So once we have this foundation with food and they kind of get used to trusting that they can eat in this way, then we start talking about hunger, fullness, and most importantly, satisfaction. Because if you are not satisfied with what you're eating, you are probably going to end up overeating and or binging later.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's the
So
nature of the beast.
this is so good. And there's so much juicy goodness packed into what you just said, starting with the undiet. Because, by the time you hit 35, or I'm turning 50 in February, the number of diets that I have tried and been on are ridiculous. It's like more than my hands I could even count on.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing for so many women is that diet and body size and body weight somehow get all wrapped up into self-worth.
Yes, 100%. Hmm.
And so this idea of unpacking that diet culture, I am all for.
Yeah.
And the idea of eating intuitively and trying to, just listen to our body's cues. It's so good. It's so good. And everything that you were saying, and you were talking about my clients feel this way, feel this way. I was like, yes, check. Yes, check. Yes, check.
Yeah. Yeah. The number of times that I've had someone either talking with them on a discovery call or even in a session, and they're like, "Are you in my head? Have you been, are you listening to me?" And I've done this long enough. I have my own journey with it too, my own healing experience. And so it's, it's important to share what you just did because it helps us understand like we are not alone. We have not learned these behaviors with food, these behaviors with our body, the dieting. We have not learned that you need to be smaller to be worthy in a vacuum.
Right.
Like it's everybody has learned it in this age group and beyond too. The other reason that I'm really passionate about working with women in this space is because I see us as the turning point to putting an end to eating disorders for further future generations.
Yes. And I've heard you speak to that in Pitch to Press.
Mhm.
And I would love to just open this conversation up, because
Yeah.
we know that eating disorders are really prevalent among teenagers and women in their 20s. And the other day, when I heard you talk about how we, meaning people in midlife,
Yeah.
could be the way that that stops, my mind just blew. So
Yeah.
please talk to us.
Yeah. So let's go back just a little bit and talk about that word undiet for just a hot minute because this will relate. So I look at the word as undiet as being really important in midlife because it's an unraveling. We
Hmm.
are unraveling all of the BS. Hopefully that's okay for me to say on your show,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we're unraveling all of the BS that a woman in midlife has learned about how she's supposed to eat to be healthy, the size of her body to be healthy, worthy, beautiful, all of the above. And when a woman in midlife can focus on the work to help herself do that unraveling, there's a trickle down effect. The younger women and girls that are around her, be that her own kids, nieces, if she's a teacher, the kids that she's influencing there, a coach, however woman in midlife might interact with the younger generations, when they see and or experience how she is learning to unravel and unlearn all of these toxic messages that she has learned about food in her body in a very proactive way, they start to notice like, oh, I can do that with my body too. I'm hearing in these teen magazines or on the social media or the TikTok, like I should be doing this and this and this for my beauty,
Mhm.
but that's not what's being modeled from me in front of me in my direct circles of live in-person mentors. And so that's how I see that cycle, because it is a generational cycle of
Mhm.
disordered eating. All of my clients, I'm going to say 98% of them, they have been on some form of diet, restrictive eating, or just extreme awareness of food in their body since puberty. And who did they learn that from? They learned it from their moms, they learned it from their grandmothers, they learned it from their aunts. And by the way, this is not to push any of those other women under the bus at
Mhm.
all,
Mhm.
because they learned it from their ancestors. So that's why many of my colleagues in the eating disorder space, like they do work a lot with teens and they do work a lot with early 20s. And I just found over the course of my work, one, I have a better relationship building rapport skill set to work with the old ladies, quote unquote. And as I just started to watch it, when I would work with teens, I'm like, the teen isn't the problem. The mom's the problem, or the parents just in general are the problem. It's the messages that are happening at home, the messages that are happening in our health curriculum at schools. That's the problem. The
Mhm.
teen is just doing what she's been taught to do as to be acceptable in this culture. So I went, okay, colleagues, you can deal with the teens. I'm dealing with like stop the message where it's happening front
Mhm.
with the adults. So that's how I landed where I am.
Oh my gosh, it's so big because if we know that many people's self-worth is tied up into their weight, into their food, into their diet, into their body size, and then we have distorted views of what's normal. And we've been sold a bill of goods about what beauty is and what health looks like and what real nutrition is. And then we see this one set of messaging that we need to be eating whole foods if we're adults. And yet, if you're a teenager and you're in high school, you're being fed processed goods and not real food and things like pizza and french fries. And then you go off to college and it's more of the same. It's so confusing. It's no wonder that people are like throwing their hands up, like, I don't know what to do.
Right. Absolutely. And it gets confusing, I think, even in this perimenopause and menopause space too, because in a way, just similar to what you're talking about, we start to get these mixed messages because as we're entering into this season of change in our life, we're preyed upon by the health and wellness and beauty culture. Like, don't get the wrinkles, don't get the gray hair, watch out for your cholesterol and your blood sugar and all of this. And here's some products to help you do all of that.
Mm,
And we end up again in that mixed messaging going, well, yeah, but I know that general healthy eating is, the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains and the this and that. Do I really need to take this sort of supplement over here or this powder or this potion? Like, I don't know. Like, what's the legitimacy of that? Is it because especially because our supplements are not regulated in this country? And I'm not against supplements by any means, but I'm all for people being conscious consumers
mhm.
when it comes to that. So you're right. There's these mixed messages that happen all the time. Like, you do this to be healthy, but then this side over here says, yeah, but do that, but not this.
Mhm.
And it just, you end up being in this ping pong ball machine, which is why I think like intuitive eating and teaching my clients like the skills of learning how to shut up and listen to yourself and tune down the noise of all of the other recommendations coming from diet wellness culture. Then you have all the information that you need. You have the information to go and ask good questions to your healthcare providers and stand up for yourself and saying, hey, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z in my body. Can
Mhm.
you help me with that? Granted, that can fall on deaf ears at times. And weight stigma in medical communities is a whole different conversation, which could probably be its own podcast show.
Right.
And women in midlife are often just dismissed, period, because there is research on this population and what health is and how we can help women define health, but it's very weight biased. It's very white biased.
Mhm.
And so again, the applicability in like a generalized way of some of the results that come out of studies with perimenopause and menopause, we still have to try them on for our own lived experience
Yeah.
and spend a lot of time talking with women about that.
So a couple things are coming up for me around this. One is we've talked a lot about perimenopause and menopause. And so I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. And then I also want to hear more about how someone might be able to start intuitively eating. But when we talk about perimenopause and menopause, there are so many messages out there about what it is. And we all think that it's going to be like a turkey popper, like poof, pop, you're done. You've achieved perimenopause, or poof, you've achieved menopause. And it's just so much more subtle and nuanced that it can be years or decades that you're in perimenopause. And maybe you know it, maybe you don't. Maybe blood tests show it, maybe they don't. And so I think for many women, the place that it starts to show up is how they feel, brain fog, and weight gain,
Yeah.
at least for the women that I talked to. And that was
Yes.
my experience as well. In fact, I didn't realize until I received an email from a male doctor after I had declined many invasive procedures because I was like, I'm fine. I'm healthy. I'm an intuitive. I'm fine. I can feel this in my body. I know this. And then he emailed me after a blood test and said, oh yeah, turns out we don't need any of those tests because you're postmenopausal. And so the email, that's like one whole other thing.
Yeah, I love that. When you said that in Pitch to Press, I was like, oh, that's a whole story in and of itself.
Yeah. So that's a story for another day, why that happened. But
Yeah.
the fact that there's so much confusion and even our doctors don't know when this is happening. And so we might just have to rely on these symptoms of the brain fog, the weight changes or the weight gain or metabolic change, or even just shape changing. What are some things that we maybe could do for nutrition to support that? And then maybe we can dovetail that into talking about how we could be intuitive about eating.
Yeah. Yeah. Great ideas. You're absolutely right in that there can be a lot of misinformation about this season of life, and it can be hard to get the right information, or at least something that resonates with you. And so, just for some definition, perimenopause can start in your late 30s, for early perimenopause. And for most women, they're probably starting to experience perimenopause symptoms in their 40s. And I think the average, if I'm remembering right, the average age of menopause is around 51, 52. And this is natural menopause, not surgical. And so, yeah, we're talking almost a decade for some people. And we hear a lot about the hot flash part. That's primarily what I heard when I was growing up from, the older women and my mom and all that. I just heard all this about hot flashes, hot flashes, hot flashes. And I saw them be uncomfortable and things like that. I heard nothing about brain fog. I heard nothing about dizziness, which is the bane of my midlife experience. Let me tell you that. I heard nothing about like the inconsistencies with cycle changes. I heard nothing about the increased anxiety, depression, even if someone had not been prone to those earlier in life and all of a sudden this mental state shows up. I hadn't heard anything about that. I'd heard some about like, the menopause moods, stuff like that, the anger and the fragility and all that, I heard about that in the hot flashes. But I never heard like why. I never heard that how much our estrogen receptors and all of our other hormones too, how much those regulate a bunch of systems throughout our body, particularly our central nervous system, which is what's running the show with the vasomotor, the hot flash experience or the night sweats, but it's also contributing to that mental health side of things. So, and I think it's really ironic because even though I'm sure it could be improved upon, but most women, especially if they had a kid, they heard about blanking on the name, see, perimenopause moment. But the postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Like not everybody hears about, like I said, I think there's improvement for that, but people hear about that mental health component to post-pregnancy. Why don't we hear about it when it comes to perimenopause and menopause? And from what I've read is that many of those mental health pieces, they can improve and they can change once you get into menopause. But that's something that's not talked about. It's also not talked about that, or we'll hear it as like menopause. Menopause is one day. It's one day that says you've no longer had a period for a whole year. The rest of it, the rest of the experience, that's all perimenopause. But I learned that word like 4 or 5 years ago. Everything I had ever heard was like menopause. It's all menopause. Well, it's not. Menopause is one day.
You know what?
And that's just an example of.
This hits for me. I had to look up postmenopause. I looked it up. I Googled it. I had never heard the term postmenopausal. I didn't know what it meant. Yeah. I'm well educated. And this came in an email. And And so I
Yeah,
love that you're creating this distinction and awareness around what actually is this, and that the
yeah.
perimenopause is this whole process that so many people are in that feels really difficult.
Right, right. And you mentioned something about the blood tests. That is another kind of messy area too, in that there really aren't any blood tests to say you're perimenopausal. We can do blood tests to show like maybe what your hormones are doing, but even some of those, depending on the test, like there's some accuracy questioning around that. The only test, and this is could be what your doctor ran on you, is your FSH, your follicle stimulating hormone, and you can do a blood test for that. And when you are in menopause, or you've had menopause, we should say that one day, that lab value is going to be lower than it is for your life prior to that.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that I see a lot in like social media of like selling like go get this test and go get this test, and it's not that cut and dry when it comes to perimenopause. So getting to your question about like, okay, well, what do we do with all of those fun party favors that we get in this phase of life? Like, how can we help ourselves? Because I'm a big fan of, okay, if something's hard, something's difficult, something's a challenge, like, okay, how can we take care of ourselves to the best of our abilities during this time, whatever it is that's going on with you? I look at perimenopause and like nutrition for perimenopause. And I say that intentionally, not necessarily menopause, because again, like menopause is that one day, and then we would talk about nutrition for post-menopause. But there's so much opportunity, I think, for women when we're knocking on the door of 40 or we're in our 40s that we can do from a nutrition perspective, a gentle, compassionate nutrition perspective, not a diety nutrition perspective, but that can then either ease the effects of the symptoms of perimenopause or help us, move into menopause and postmenopause with a little bit more grace and discomfort and comfort and ease and that sort of thing. So the main areas that I think about with perimenopause nutrition include getting adequate fiber. Many Americans, the standard American diet, don't get enough fiber. And there can be some creative and tasty ways to do that. Getting in enough protein, not being crazy about protein, but making sure that we're getting in enough. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Jen Salop-Huber, has a really brilliant way of describing the protein part of things, in that there's the main characters of protein and there are supporting characters of protein. And the main characters are, of course, are like meat, fish, chicken, eggs, soy, and they're just the main characters because they have more grams of protein per ounce of food. Supporting characters are beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, dairy, like more like hard cheese type dairy, or like Greek yogurt has higher concentration of protein. So when we're in perimenopause or in our 40s, if we can, I like to think about it as like shifting our awareness. We're kind of up leveling our mindfulness around our protein, meaning when we get to a meal, do we have a main character of protein? Do we have a supporting character of protein? Let's double up on those so that we are then getting enough protein to support building muscle or maintaining the muscle that we have, supporting our moods, like blood sugar regulation. That's where protein can be the biggest help for us. And again, we don't need powders and bars and things like that. We can still be just eating regular food, but it's more upping that mindfulness around, okay, I'm at my breakfast, I'm at my lunch. Do I have all my characters? For a snack, making sure we're at least getting a supporting character of protein in there. The other nutrients that I really think about are iron-rich foods, whether that is if someone's eating meat or they're eating plants, but if we're eating plant sources of iron, making sure we're getting a vitamin C source in there too, to make that plant form of iron really absorbable. Getting in enough magnesium-rich foods and or taking a supplement, because unfortunately magnesium is one of those minerals that's been quite depleted out of our soils. And magnesium for women in midlife can not only help with there's like 300 different processes in our bodies that magnesium is a part of. But most important to midlife is that sense of calm and decreased anxiety, decreased the kind of mental rage and the anger and the frustration, and supporting being able to stay grounded in our bodies. So magnesium is really great for that. So that's your pumpkin seeds. Most beans and legumes are high in magnesium. Whole grains are great sources too. And then calcium is also important too, because we're moving into an era where we're going to be breaking down bone faster than we're building bone. And of course, osteoporosis is a concern postmenopausal. And so focusing on calcium-rich foods, but I like to encourage people, again, from that variety perspective, is to think outside of the dairy box. Yeah, dairy is a great source of calcium, but so are dark leafy greens, so are almonds, so are dried figs. My personal favorite are dried nettle infusions, which just means it's a nettle tea that's been soaked overnight and gotten the most nutrients out of that dried herb as possible. It's fairly high in calcium and there's a bunch of other minerals too. So I just, again, it comes from that place of variety. I have nothing against dairy for calcium, but we can get calcium from these other foods too. And those are also going to have fiber in them. So really, if a woman is focusing on the magnesium sources, the calcium sources, the plant-based calcium sources, the protein, and maybe leaning on the plant-based sources of protein, they're going to be getting enough fiber. So that was the other one that I mentioned that is a kind of a key nutrient in midlife. For many of my clients, they have challenges with irritable bowel syndrome, primarily on the constipation side, because again, I see this come from a nervous system perspective where we're just like so amped up and we're so anxious. And so that GI tract is just holding on, holding on, holding on. And so the magnesium can help with that, again, that sense of calm. And then of course the fiber too. So that's how I see all of those nutrition components show up. I'll pause there because that was a lot in case you.
That was a lot. It was really, really good. My mind was racing. And so one of the things I wanted to say is I did not know that plant-based iron needed to be consumed with vitamin C. That was
Yeah.
kind of a mic drop moment for me because I have been plant-based for 7 years and did not know that.
Yeah, so there's two forms of iron. There's heme iron and there's non-heme iron. And heme iron comes from animals and it's very readily absorbed. Non-heme iron can still be absorbed, but it likes to be partnered with vitamin C. So if you're eating, well, let's say spinach. Spinach has been known for high iron content. Then have some citrus in your dressing that you have with your spinach salad, or some bell peppers on it, or a broccoli is actually pretty high in vitamin C too. The thing is with vitamin C though, you don't want to cook the food that has the vitamin C in it because vitamin C is destroyed by heat and water, or at least lowered in its quantity. So this is where like having those salads can be a great way to focus on that plant-based version of iron. So
I love that.
Good question.
Wow. That's so good. So much information. And I love that you were talking about like the primary character of protein and the secondary character of protein. And then I've heard that magnesium and fiber are really important for women in midlife. And to hear you say it so clearly and eloquently, and then give examples of those foods, it was so good. Which reminds me, you've got some free gifts for the Ways of Joy listeners. Can you talk about those? Because I want to make sure I create space for that.
Yeah, for sure. I do have a couple of downloads that people can go and get from my website, but I will say too, just based on what I was just mentioning about those pieces of what I would call gentle or compassionate nutrition for women in midlife, I just finished up a whole live series training that I did on both the SAVOR Food and Body YouTube channel and the Alpine Nutrition Facebook page. And so actually these episodes were also uploaded onto the SAVOR Food and Body podcast, the podcast that I host. And so women can go and listen to those recordings of they're anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes or so about everything I just rattled off to you. And there's 5 episodes of it, or 5 sessions of it, and it's called How to Be Great at Intuitive Eating in Midlife. So they can go to, again, YouTube, SAVOR Food and Body, SAVOR Food and Body podcast, or the Alpine Nutrition Facebook page if they want to see a face to the name sort of thing. The other 2 downloads that I have for folks that they can get on my website, and we can include those direct links in the show notes. One is that they're both like guides, and one is called 5 Reasons That You're Not Losing Weight After 40. And they are reasons that you will not have expected, because they're the undiet reasons that someone is having a challenge of not losing weight, and or keeping a stable weight. We'll also say that. The second one is what I call the Thrive Guide, and it's the 6 strategies to thriving in midlife. And there I kind of walk through, it's definitely more detailed than the 5 reasons someone's not losing weight. The Thrive Guide has more details about each one of these 6 strategies that, again, they're undiet strategies, and help from a broad strokes perspective on healing that relationship with food in your body so that you can get out of the diet cycle and really start to just nourish your body during this time of seasonal change for yourself.
I love this. I love this. And so something about the way that you said intuitive eating right there made me think of something, and I wanted to ask this question, and there's no way to ask it without sounding like I'm making a joke, and I'm not making a joke. But when we're talking about intuitive eating, it's not like I feel like eating chips. It's not that kind of intuition, right?
Yes and no.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah. So I love how you asked that too, because this kind of goes into like, okay, well, how do we do intuitive eating in midlife? There is a key component to intuitive eating that is, well, there's several of them. Foundational ones are rejecting the diet mentality. So part of that means you got to allow yourself permission to eat the chips. You have to work through, again, all those messages that you've been taught about why you shouldn't eat the chips, what's going to happen to your health or your waistline if you eat the chips. So I look at kind of the different stages of intuitive eating, and this is, like I said, my unique spin on intuitive eating. And in those first stages of intuitive eating, particularly for women in midlife, we have to challenge that diet mentality that they have been taught over all of the years and the decades. The next piece to that is too, just looking at your chips example, we have to work on making peace with all foods. All foods are allowed on the table. That does not mean that all foods have the same nutritional value. I mean, I have a master's degree in nutrition. I'm not pretending that potato chips have the same value as a salad does or the burger does or whatever. But when we say that making full permission with all foods or allowing all foods to the table, we're reducing the morality assigned to food. We've spent years saying this is a good food, this is a bad food, this is a healthy food, this is an unhealthy food. But what happens to us psychologically is when we hear that good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, when I eat this food, then I start to think, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm healthy, I'm unhealthy. So we have to unlearn that whole process of it. So part of it, and someone might say, and this might be your follow-up question, like, but Amanda, I'm going to eat the whole bag of chips. Like, that can't be good for my health. What will happen, and we know this from the research on habituation, if you allow yourself full permission with chips and you have as much as you want, you know that, when you run out, you go and buy more. You don't go into this deprivation cycle of like, oh, I can't believe I ate the whole bag in one time. No, you need to go buy more chips. What will happen eventually is that sexy allure, that compulsion to those chips, because you think you're getting away with something from whatever diet rule you had been following or was in your psyche somewhere. When you let go of that, the chips stop being this thing to be compulsive about. They just start being chips, something that's kind of salty and kind of crunchy and pairs nice with a sandwich or tacos, whatever. So, and I love that you mentioned chips because I have had the number of clients that we have worked through tortilla chips, we have worked through Oreos, we have worked through M&Ms, and it's the same story. It doesn't matter what the food is. And the number of times that the client has thought and even said to me, Amanda, you're batshit crazy. I cannot have a whole bag of potato chips or M&Ms in my house. I just can't do it. Like, I'm going to eat them all. I'm like, then go buy more. Like, you got to trust me on this because we've seen it in the research when it comes to studying habituation, and that's what we're working on here. Full permission means you have habituated yourself to allowing that food to be there. One of my favorite examples is one of my clients, this is with M&Ms. She was just, struggling with the M&Ms. She's like, this is crazy. I just keep filling up the bowl and I keep eating more. She's like, it's a Costco-sized bag of M&Ms. That can't be good. So you just trust me on this. I've done this long enough. I've seen the pattern. Like, just trust me on it. Okay, fine. So time goes on. All of a sudden, she's not talking about M&Ms anymore. And I ask her in a session, I'm like, what, are you still having M&Ms? Or, oh yeah, they're on the counter. I think my kid ate the rest of them last time. I'm like, well, that's interesting. It's not you finishing them all. She's like, well, I'll have a couple, a little handful here and there, but I don't really care. She said, you know what? The other weird thing is, I'm leaving plates of half-eaten cookies around the house too. It's like, huh, that's interesting. She's like, I never used to do that. I ate the whole plate and then I went and filled the plate up and then I just kept eating the cookies. I said, see, this is habituation.
I
Well
love
done.
this. And I have anecdotal evidence in my own life around this. So,
Yeah.
Ruffles sour cream and cheddar potato chips are my favorite, and I love Trader Joe's dark chocolate coconut covered almonds. And it used to be that I would kind of, eat the whole bag or eat the whole carton. And I was working with somebody who suggested that I keep them around. And the first thing that happened was I went through an entire box of the portioned Ruffles and sour cream or cheddar and sour cream chips in about 3 weeks. And then I bought it again. And then it took me about 4 months. And then I bought it again. And I've still had the same box because just knowing that I have it and there's no scarcity around it,
Exactly.
it
Yep.
changes everything.
Yep. That scarcity mindset is what keeps us trapped in the diet cycle, or the binge restrict cycle can be called a couple of different things. But when our brain or our body thinks I will never get this food again, when we do have it right in front of us, we want all the pleasure, all the satisfaction right now, which seems so ironic because you would think like, well, if you're never going to have it again, why not stretch it out? But it doesn't work that way,
No.
especially if there's any guilt or shame around the fact that I'm eating said food. I mean, there's a reason that this really isn't a problem with salad. It's not a problem with apples,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of a conversation around these snack foods, the dessert foods.
Because we place morality around it.
Exactly. We do, and the culture does too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Oh,
one of the things that I just wanted to dovetail onto this, because you were asking like, okay, well then how do we do this intuitive eating in midlife? So the full permission with food piece is really important, but so is the satisfaction piece. And so when we're working on, we first allow the food to be there. Then I ask clients like, okay, and why is that food? Like, why is it those chips that are satisfying? Why is it that food, that snack food, the chocolate covered coconut almonds? Why is that satisfying? And when we can drill into that, and we go, okay, we need these flavors, these textures, these tastes in your life regularly, so that you can feel satisfied with your eating experience. When you feel satisfied, you're more likely to be able to tune in to when is your subtle fullness, and not still chasing the flavor that you didn't get, the texture that you didn't get. And then as we were talking about those other like kind of key nutrients that I like to focus on with midlife, that falls into this gentle or compassionate nutrition, I call it. So we're not adding any mindfulness around those foods because we should be. It's just that they will help us feel better in our bodies. But by the time we get to that point, when I'm working with someone, and this can be, months, 6 to 9 months down the road, oftenly, is that that person is also able to explain, oh, I know how I feel if I eat this meal. I
Mhm.
know how I feel when I eat this meal from a very objective, compassionate curiosity perspective, not a moral judgment. And so they're able to say, yeah, when I'm getting more iron rich foods around my period, if they're still having a period, periods can be fairly heavy in perimenopause towards the later end. Oh, I feel like I have a little bit more energy. Or if I do, someone might say, if I do have a little bit more chocolate, man, it was delicious, but I didn't sleep all night and my anxiety was through the roof.
Mhm.
So when we get to that body respecting, gentle nutrition, compassionate nutrition perspective, a client is able to understand their body from that intuitive, innate place and not have the diet culture is still there because we live in it every day,
Right.
but the volume of those messages has significantly been reduced.
I
And
love this.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. And so I'm thinking about this from the lens of women that I work with, and I'm thinking about how we have we've created this moral judgment around pleasure in general. And the one form of pleasure that we are often told is socially acceptable is around food. And so it's really, really important to allow ourselves the fullest version of pleasure in every area of our lives. And I love that you're unpacking this for us in the sense of creating the texture that we want, the flavor that we want, the feeling of the food, so that we can notice when we're full. And I
mhm,
think that that applies to everything. Like we could take this into our relationships, into our sex lives, into our work life, into everything, and just think about what is it that I can allow myself to fully experience that brings me
absolutely.
pleasure in this situation.
Yep. That's why I love the term undiet so much, because when you start, it's unraveling, pulling apart all of those messages that you've been taught about food, your body, worthiness, health, beauty, all of that. And you start building these skills based on intuitive eating. Um, it trickles into other areas of your life. So on SAVOR Food and Body podcast in February, I know it's Heart Health Month, but we're going to talk about sex. And I have a number of sexologists that are coming on the podcast, because the number of times that it's coming up in sessions with clients of like, my body's changing. I don't feel comfortable with it sexually, or I'm afraid that my partner, my spouse is going to leave me because my body is changing. And, seems kind of funny to have a dietitian hosting a series on sex, but there is this direct bleed through between, if we're not getting pleasure in multiple areas of our life, oftentimes we turn towards food and ask
Yes.
food to do all of the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
And food was never designed to be a therapist or to be your sexual pleasure or any of that. So it's an important part of this whole conversation, for
It
sure.
absolutely is. And you would not be surprised. You would not be surprised, but listeners might be surprised to know how often sex comes up in conversation, and how much when we start to talk about giving and receiving and allowing things into our lives, that there has been some sort of judgment placed around pleasure, and in particular for women around sexual pleasure. And so, there's some great resources that you can go to unpack that. And it sounds like one of them is on your podcast. So
Yeah. Yeah. The
go.
series is going to start next week. Yep.
That's
hmm
amazing. Amanda, where can people find you?
So the best place to find me is alpinenutrition.org. That's my website. And there are links there to the podcast. That's where all of the podcast show notes show up in the blog, as well as other just regular blog posts. That's where you can find any of the links to download those free guides I was talking about, the 5 reasons you're not losing weight after 40, and the Thrive guide. And that's really like the hub of all of it. Of course, the Savor Food and Body podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. And more increasingly, I'm posting things on the YouTube Savor Food and Body channel. That's where you can see all of the raw, unedited videos of the podcast episodes. So if people like to have that visual face to name, like that's a good place to go too. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
all the spots. Yeah. Oh,
Oh
and
my
on
gosh.
Instagram, I'm Instagram and Facebook are both Alpine Nutrition. So
Okay, so go give Amanda a follow because
yeah.
as you can hear, she has got some great perspective and really, really helpful, tangible things. Amanda, I just have 5 questions for you, but as we wrap up and they're just for fun. The
Yep.
first one is, what is in your morning mug?
Oh, this is a great one because I've been exploring with this over the last year. And I am not an affiliate with this brand at all. But what I'm really loving is this brand of coffee alternative called Rasa. You can look up their website at, I think it's wearerasa.org or .com, I'm not sure. But it's really great because it's based on helping to provide energy, but not the crash of coffee. And they have a bunch of really delicious blends. I'm loving the cocoa blend because it's like a cup of hot chocolate. And they have a bunch of other really tasty stuff too. So that's usually in my mug for a hot morning beverage. There's also the nettle infusion, of course, like I mentioned earlier, that's like my liquid multivitamin. But yeah, the cup of rasa is always there in
Ooh,
the
that's
morning.
interesting. I'm going to have to check that out. I don't see myself ever leaving coffee
Yeah,
because
that's
I
okay.
love coffee and it helps my asthma so much
Oh,
that
interesting.
it starts my day. Coffee has a natural theophylline in it, which
Uh-huh.
they use to extract theophylline from coffee to make the asthma medication Theodore.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just feel
Huh.
good, and I like it. But I'm curious about the rasa. I might give that a try just for an afternoon pick me up.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're curious or anyone else is too, if you go to my website and you just hit like the contact, that will get you on my email list. And I have a link. Again, I'm not an affiliate with Rasa, but those of us that order from them regularly, we have a link that can get people $10 off their first order of Rasa. And I always include that in the footer of my weekly emails. So if somebody wants a discount to go check it out,
Awesome.
it's a good
Yeah,
place.
that'd be fun. My
Yeah.
next question is there a song that you love that every time you hear it, you're just like, yes, I feel so great. I can do anything.
Oh man. Okay, so if we're just going for that energy around the song, I would have to say Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson.
Oh, that's a
I
good song.
I think about it particularly in this scenario, just like you said, like I can do anything because I love how it starts off slow and then it's very powerful in the middle. And when I listen to the words of it, and I have no idea where his intentions were with the words, but when I think about it in relation to women standing up against diet culture, that's what I think about when I hear that song.
Mm, that's
So
cool. That's cool. Is there a podcast that you listen to that you love?
I will be fully honest, like podcasts they're great for my commutes back and forth to Seattle, but I don't do it enough. But I aspire to listening to podcasts more consistently. I should because I'm a podcaster and that's what I hope for people for my shows. But what I am really loving, and because I'm learning a lot from too, is my colleague Jen Salib Huber's podcast, The Midlife Feast. She's a naturopath and a dietitian. And so she's been doing the midlife space for a lot longer than I have. So I always pick up really good nuggets from her. Um, I'm also trying to think. I often will listen to Marie Forleo's podcast, just because she's a business mentor of mine, and I love some of the guests that she has on. Um, those are probably my top two. I think that I've just been learning so much in my other podcasts. I have a whole laundry list of podcasts to go and listen to after meeting so many of you guys in Pitch to Press. But What the Fork is also one that I'll dabble in every once in a while, and 10% Happier too. And that's kind of a double a double whammy for me because I like their meditation courses in the 10% Happier app. And then I also love the snippets that they have about like neuroscience and nervous system work and all of that on their podcast. So,
Oh, that's so cool. Great
yeah.
recommendations right there. Love it. Who inspires you?
Two. I will say one person and a set of people. The one person probably that inspires me most consistently is my dad. And he's in his 80th year, as he would say. He's not turned 80, but he's in his 80th year. That's how he rolls. And just last year, the guy did a 36-mile backpack in the Wallowa Mountains with us, myself and some friends, in 36 hours. I mean, it was just incredible that he just kind of goes along, he doesn't get freaked out about like his mobility or his performance. Like he's never been a big athlete. He's been a very active person, but not an athlete. And so he just has this really great relationship with his aging body, with his abilities as he's aging. And that's just really inspiring to watch that, and that he's not getting stressed out about it. He's not trying to biohack his health. He's just like, hey, this is what I got, and I'm going to do the best I can with what I got. The other inspiring group is my clients. I learned so much from them, and they're all unique lived experiences. And I just love that, being able to have that collaborative relationship with them. And it pushes me to learn more. Like I wouldn't have been specializing in midlife if it hadn't been all these midlife ladies showing up in my practice over the last almost decade. So yeah, I just love how they continue to challenge me and continue to push me to be a better provider for them.
I love that. That's a beautiful answer. And my last question is, if you find yourself in a funk, feeling sad or mad or anxious, what do you do to flip the switch so that you can access joy?
So if there's not snow and ice on the ground, I am on my road bike riding around the beautiful Wallowa County and looking at the mountains. If there is snow and ice in the ground, which there currently is, then I will lay on the floor, usually like knees up or legs up on a yoga ball, and just kind of let the floor hold my heaviness, the heaviness of my body, the heaviness of what I'm feeling. And whether I just lay there and do some deep breathing or read something that's more on the pleasure side of things than work related, but just that literally grounding myself, I find really helps kind of flip that switch. So it's kind of interesting to have them kind of polar opposites. I either go crank out some time on my bike or I lay on the floor. But it's helpful to have, both coping tools for all seasons.
Yes, coping tools for all seasons. Amanda, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Brenda. Thank you so much for having me.
Since I spoke with Amanda, the podcast rebrand happened. And so I reached out to Amanda and asked her one last question. And that question is this: what is one thing that you did or didn't do in order to create your yes-filled life? Here's Amanda's answer.
Hey, Brenda, it's Amanda. Hopefully this recording works well for you, and let me know if you need anything different. So the one thing that has helped me live more of a yes-filled life more than anything is honestly undieting my life. I lived for many years with a really unhealthy relationship with food and exercise, and my whole life revolved around what I wasn't eating, what I was eating, trying to be perfect and healthy, and how I was exercising and trying to get in all my training workouts as a competitive marathon runner. So there I missed friends gatherings, family stuff, and honestly I don't really have a lot of memories from that part of my life either, other than my running achievements. So there was a lot more restriction to my life when I was following more of a dieting life. So undieting my life has been the biggest component to me living more with more freedom, more options, and from more of an expansive place versus a contractive place. So I hope that's helpful, and to talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye.
Are you living your yes filled life? If you feel ready to reclaim your power, live a life aligned with your true purpose, and experience the profound personal transformation you've been seeking, let's jump on a Find Your Yes discovery session. To register for this free call, simply go to calendly.com, calendly.com/Brenda Winkle /discovery. That's calendly.com/Brenda Winkle /discovery. Let's get you to your yes filled life. Wasn't that a juicy conversation? Here are the takeaways. If you limit your satisfaction with an eating experience or are not satisfied with what you eat, you'll probably end up overeating or binging later. Satisfaction is an incredibly important part of intuitive eating. Number two, you are not alone. You haven't learned behaviors with food and dieting in a vacuum. So give yourself some grace. Number three, undiet in midlife is the unraveling of all the BS a woman has learned. When a woman in midlife can focus on this work to unravel her relationships with the toxic messages around food and body image, there is a trickle down effect. Women in midlife can model a new, healthy way of thinking that could end disordered eating for women of all ages. Number four, there can be mixed messages about our health because of the biases that are present for women in midlife, weight biases, and the slant toward white women. Number five, perimenopause can begin around age 35. Menopause happens on average age between 50 and 51. Increased anxiety or depression, brain fog, inconsistent cycles, hot flashes, and muscle aches are all caused by changes in hormones during this time in life. These changes aren't just physical, they can also impact mental health. Number six, menopause is one day. Perimenopause is the process that happens before that can last decades. Postmenopause means that you've gone beyond the 1 year mark of not having a period. Number seven, there are things to do from a gentle, compassionate nutrition perspective that can ease the effects of perimenopause and support us as we move into menopause or postmenopause with more grace and ease. And these are number one, eating adequate fiber. Number two, eating enough protein to build and maintain muscle and support our moods. Think of the main characters of protein and the supporting characters of protein. Main characters include meat, fish, eggs, chicken, and soy. Supporting characters are beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, hard cheeses in the dairy category, and Greek yogurt. Try to get a main character and a supporting character at each meal, and at least a supporting character at each snack. Number three, iron rich foods. If you're plant based, be sure to include a vitamin C food to help with the absorption of the iron. Spinach combined with citrus is a very easy way to do this. Number four, magnesium rich foods. Magnesium can help with multiple processes in the body, but most important for this phase of life is bringing in a sense of calm and also easing constipation. Pumpkin seeds, legumes, and whole grains are examples of magnesium rich foods. And number five, calcium is important at this age. Think outside of the dairy box to include dark leafy greens, almonds, or dried figs. Number eight, intuitive eating includes untangling from messaging around food and challenging the diet message. Work to make peace with all foods. Now, of course, not all foods have the same nutritional value, but reducing the morality or the good food, bad food that can be assigned to food is really supportive of our own intuitive eating. Number nine, the research of habituation means giving yourself full permission to allow all foods to be there. When you run out of chips or Oreos or M&Ms, go buy more. Eventually, you'll be able to have that food around because you shift the scarcity around the food. That's shifting the diet mindset. And number 10, pleasure matters. When we restrict pleasure in any area, it can cause an imbalance in other areas. What can you allow yourself to fully experience that brings you pleasure in this moment? I'm going to be putting Amanda's contact information in the show notes. Be sure and reach out to her. And if you loved this episode, would you please go give the podcast a rating and a review? We'd love to hear from you. And if you really loved this episode, could you please share it with someone you care about? Until next time, bye for now.